I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to the Hebraic Heritage Ministries Yeshiva Discipleship Program. The Discipleship Program is a series of teachings to help you to be rooted and grounded on the foundational principles of the Hebraic roots of Christianity. In this teaching, we're going to be speaking on the subject of Hanukkah and the controversy of Zion. And in doing so, we're going to see how Hanukkah is a prophecy of the events of the end of days. In sharing with you this teaching on Hanukkah, we are going to cover the following. First, we're going to share with you the historical background of events, of which we have major details in the book of Daniel, that from these events we ultimately have the celebration today of what is known as Hanukkah. We're going to share with you some of the customs of Hanukkah, and then we're going to share with you how some of the events of Hanukkah is related to the New Testament and how it's related to Christians and their view of expressing their faith in Yeshua as the Messiah. And then finally, we're going to show you how Hanukkah is prophetic of the battle of the end of days, the tribulation period, and the Great Tribulation, when the sons of Zion will be opposed to the sons of Greece. So that's what we're going to be covering in this teaching. Now first, let's go over the historical background that led to the celebration of Hanukkah. To begin with, we're going to look at Deuteronomy in chapter 7. In verses 16 and 22, we're going to see that the enemies of Israel are called beasts of the field. In Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 16 it is written, "And you shall consume all the people which the Lord your God shall deliver you. Your eyes shall have no pity upon them, neither shall you serve their gods, for that will be a snare unto you. And the Lord your God will put out these nations before you by little and little. You may not consume them at once, lest the beasts of the field increase upon you." We can see how the enemies of Israel are regarded as beasts of the field by cross-referencing Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 64 with Ezekiel chapter 34 and verse 5. In Deuteronomy 28, verse 64, it is written, "And the Lord will scatter you among all people, from one end of the earth even unto the other." Ezekiel chapter 34 and verse 5. "And they were scattered because there was no shepherd. And in being scattered in the nations of the world, they became meat to all beasts of the field when they were scattered." In Daniel, in chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar is given a dream by the God of Israel. And the dream is so terrifying that it bothers him. And as a result, he calls for the magicians, the astrologers, and the sorcerers in Babylon. And Nebuchadnezzar wanted them to be able to tell him his dream and the interpretation of the dream, but they were not able to do it. And as a result, Nebuchadnezzar made a decree that all those in high-ranking leadership around him would be killed if no one was able to tell him the dream and the meaning of the dream. And as a result, Daniel then prays to the God of Israel, and in a night vision, the God of Israel gives Daniel the understanding of the dream and the interpretation of the dream, which he shares with Nebuchadnezzar. And the dream is regarding a terrifying image which represents world empires that would rule over the nation of Israel from Nebuchadnezzar's time to the end of days. And ultimately, in the end of days, Messiah would crush all these kingdoms, and he would set up his kingdom, which we call the Messianic era. So that's the background of Daniel in chapter 2. In verse 1 it is written, "In the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. And the king said unto them, I've dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream." Then in Daniel chapter 2 and verse 19, we're told that the secret revealed unto Daniel regarding Nebuchadnezzar's dream was given to him in a night vision. And as a result, Daniel, in Daniel chapter 2 verse 24, is going to go before Nebuchadnezzar, and he's going to show Nebuchadnezzar the dream and the interpretation of the dream. Daniel chapter 2 verse 25, "Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king," that is Nebuchadnezzar, "in haste, and said, Thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah that will make known unto the king the interpretation." And so Daniel explains to Nebuchadnezzar, "You, O king, saw and behold a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before you, and the form was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold." And this is going to represent Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom of Babylon. "His breast and his arms of silver." This is going to represent the Media-Persian Empire. "His belly and thighs of brass." This is going to represent the Greek Empire. "His legs of iron." This is going to represent the Roman Empire. "His feet, part of iron and part of clay." And this is going to represent the 10 toes of the tribulation period. Daniel chapter 2 verse 35, "Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth." This is prophesying that Messiah is going to come against the beast system during the tribulation, defeat it, and he's going to set up his kingdom. We are now going to focus on the conflict wherein the Grecian Empire, led by Alexander the Great, is going to defeat the Persian Empire, the Media-Persian Empire, that in Daniel chapter 8 is going to be represented by a ram, wherein a goat is going to represent the Grecian Empire. And then following Alexander the Great defeating the Media-Persian Empire, his kingdom is going to be split into 4, and then out of one of these 4 kingdoms is going to arise one who is going to be a prophetic picture of the beast system, the false Messiah, in the end of days. And this person is Antiochus Epiphanes IV. And it's Antiochus Epiphanes IV who makes decrees in his rule and in his domain that everyone should follow Greek culture, which would require the Jews to not follow the Torah. And this caused a revolt against Antiochus. And the revolt was led by Jewish priests known as the Maccabees. And against all odds, because the God of Israel was with them, they defeated the Greeks in this rebellion. And Antiochus set up an idol in the temple, and he also sacrificed a pig on the altar, which caused the rebellion, and ultimately the Jewish rebellion defeated the Greeks and then rededicated the temple and the altar back to the God of Israel. So Daniel chapter 8 tells us about the Media-Persian Empire who was defeated by the Greek Empire. Daniel chapter 8 verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. And Daniel chapter 8 verse 16. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. And he said, Behold, I will make you know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. Daniel chapter 8 verse 3. Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. Daniel chapter 8 verse 4. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. The ram with 2 horns represents the Media-Persian Empire. Daniel chapter 8 verse 20. The ram which you saw having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia. In this picture, outlined in light green, we can see the extent of the Persian Empire. Now, continuing on in Daniel chapter 8 verse 5, it is written, And as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west. And it says that the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Daniel chapter 8 verse 21, it is explained that the goat is the king of Greece. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. This is going to be a reference to Alexander the Great. The notable horn of the Grecian Empire in Daniel chapter 8 verse 5 refers to Alexander the Great. Alexander lived from 365 BC to 323 BC. As a young boy, Alexander studied the writings of the Greek philosopher Aristotle. At age 20, Alexander became the king of the Greek state Macedonia. Later, he went to war and conquered the Persian Empire. Alexander believed that the Greek culture could unify the world. He founded a new city in each country of his empire that would serve as a model for the furtherance of the Greek culture. Public buildings, gymnasiums, open-air theaters, the spread of Greek names, Greek dress, and a common language all were byproducts of the rule of the Greek Empire. And the spread of Greek culture was known as Hellenism. So, given that Alexander believed, and this was ultimately implemented by Antiochus Epiphanes IV, that they wanted to unify the world, that they follow Greek culture, this is prophetic of the days and times in which we are living, that there is a call in the world for a new world order, which the ultimate goal and desire is one world government, and that all the nations of the world would be unified under this new world order or one world government. This is the prophetic aspect of what the Greeks desired to do and what was decreed by Antiochus Epiphanes IV as it relates and pertains to the days and times in which we are living. In Daniel chapter 8 and verse 6, it explains, And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close to the ram, and he was moved with the collar against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns. this now is a map wherein in the light green is the extent of the Grecian Empire. In Daniel chapter 8, verse 8, it is written, "Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken." Alexander the Great died at the age of 32, and as a result of his death, there was a fight or a struggle for who would then be the leader. And as a result, the Grecian kingdom was divided among the 4 generals of Alexander the Great. In Daniel chapter 8, verse 8, it is written, "Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven." Daniel chapter 8, verse 22. "Now that being broken, whereas 4 stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power." So, of these 4 generals that oversaw 4 areas within the Greek Empire, we're going to focus on the Greek part of the north of Israel, which was governed by the Seleucids, and in the south, in Egypt, it was governed by the Greek Ptolemies. In Daniel chapter 8, verse 9, it is written, "And out of one of them came forth a little horn." Now, of one of the 4 Grecian kingdoms came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land, or the land of Israel. And here you see several coins wherein Antiochus IV is portrayed as the Greek god Zeus. And the Greek god Zeus is seen as the supreme gods of all the gods of Greece. The background of the conflict between the Greek Seleucids to the north of Israel and the area of Syria, and the Greek Ptolemies to the south, which governed Egypt, is the following. The Syrian area north of the Galilee was ruled by the Greek general Seleucid I. The area south of Israel and Egypt was ruled by the Greek general Ptolemy I. Israel lay in the middle between the struggle and fight between the Greek rulers of Syria and Egypt. An eventual Seleucid ruler known as Antiochus Epiphanes IV set out to destroy the Greek ruler in Egypt, and Israel became the battleground. Here I have a chart for you where we can see the time frame where we have the Greek Seleucid ruler Antiochus IV and how it corresponded to the Greek Ptolemy ruler in Egypt, and how that is associated with the Maccabees and the Jewish priests that rebelled against the Greek Seleucids in Antiochus Epiphanes IV. Antiochus Epiphanes ruled in the time frame around 175 to 163 BC. In Daniel chapter 8, verse 22, where it explains, "Now that being broken, whereas 4 stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power." Verse 23, "And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up." Now this is going to be a reference to Antiochus Epiphanes IV. Verse 24, "And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people." That is the Jewish people. The background of the details of Antiochus IV, the decrees that he made, and the things that happened are contained in the extra-biblical books of 1st and 2nd Maccabees. In 1st Maccabees, in chapter 1 and verse 10, it explains, And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. 1 Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 20 explains that Antiochus then waged war against Israel and Jerusalem. In 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 21, that he entered proudly into the sanctuary of the temple, and he took away the golden altar, the candlestick of light, and all the vessels. 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 22. And the table of showbread, and the pouring vessels, and the vials, and the censers of gold. 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 23. He took the silver and the gold and the precious vessels. Also he took the hidden treasures which he found. 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 24. And when he had taken all away, he went into his own land, having made a great massacre, and spoke very proudly. 1 Maccabees 1:25. As a result, there was great mourning in the land of Israel. In Daniel chapter 8 verse 25, speaking of Antiochus Epiphanes IV, it is prophesied of him, by peace shall he destroy many. In 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 29, in explaining after Antiochus IV came into Jerusalem, it says in 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 30 that he spoke peaceable words, but they were all in deceit. By peace he will destroy many. And as a result, he fell suddenly upon the city and destroyed many people. 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 31. And when he had taken the spoils of the city, he set it on fire. And so Antiochus Epiphanes IV is a prophetic foreshadowing of the beast and the beast system of the end of days of Revelation in chapter 13. In Daniel chapter 8 verses 11 and 12, it is prophesied that Antiochus IV would stop the daily sacrifice in the temple. It is written, Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. And a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and practiced and prospered. We are told about Antiochus IV stopping the daily sacrifice and setting up the abomination of desolation in 1 Maccabees in chapter 1 verse 54, 56, and 59. In 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 54, it says, Now the 15th day of the month of Kislev, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar, and they built idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side. In verse 56, And when they had rent in pieces the books of the Torah which they found, they burnt them with fire. Verse 59, Now the 25th day of the month of Kislev, they did sacrifice upon the idol altar which is upon the altar of God. Daniel chapter 11 verse 31 is where it is prophesied about taking away the daily sacrifice and placing the abomination that makes desolate. Antiochus IV erected an altar of the Greek god Zeus in the temple in Jerusalem, and he sacrificed a pig upon that altar. So this was the ultimate disdain being shown to the God of Israel. That in the temple, there would be an idol set up in the temple of the supreme Greek god, that is the Greek god Zeus, and an unclean animal, a pig, would be sacrificed upon the altar. Yeshua referred to this event in Matthew chapter 24, verse 15, when he says, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. So the abomination of desolation is something that historically happened, but it is something that is going to happen again during the tribulation period. Yeshua said that when you see the abomination of desolation, then let them in Judea flee into the mountains. This is what historically happened, as when the abomination of desolation was witnessed, the Jewish priests, the Maccabees, then fled into the wilderness. From the Jewish Encyclopedia, it is explained regarding the abomination of desolation that the rabbis as a whole consider the expression abomination of desolation refers to the desecration of the temple by the putting up of a Zeus statue. Continuing from the Jewish Encyclopedia, the expression in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 15 of Yeshua, the abomination of desolation, the Jewish Encyclopedia explains that the context of these passages leaves no room for doubt as to what was intended by this expression. And that is Antiochus Epiphanes then transforming the temple in Jerusalem and desecrating it by setting up this statue of Zeus and slaying a pig on the altar. Witnessing the abomination of desolation, the Maccabees flee into the mountains. 1 Maccabees chapter 2 and verse 1. In those days arose Mattathias, and 1 Maccabees chapter 2 verse 2, he had 5 sons. 1 Maccabees chapter 2 verse 6, and when he saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he instructed in 1 Maccabees chapter 2 verse 28 that he and his sons flee into the mountains. So when Yeshua said in Matthew chapter 24 verse 15, when you see the abomination of desolation, speaking of a future event, let those in Judea flee into the mountains, that is exactly what happened historically when Antiochus IV erected a statue of Zeus in the temple and sacrificed a pig upon it. The Jewish priests who rebelled against this fled into the wilderness, or they fled into the mountains. Who is Zeus? In Greek mythology, Zeus is the chief of the Greek gods. Zeus is personified as an image of appeasement, order, wisdom, and justice. And Zeus was able to claim the title of the father of the gods and the father of men. And an eagle was a symbol of Zeus. In Greek mythology, Zeus was married to Europa. And in Greek mythology, Zeus is personified as a beast. And Europa is personified as a woman riding on the beast. And the continent of Europe is named after Europa. Here I have a picture for you where we have a woman sitting on a bull. The bull is representation of Zeus, and the woman is Europa. Here I have a picture for you of a British stamp of 1984 representing the European Parliament, and the stamp contains Europa riding the beast. Next, I have a picture for you of an artist's rendition in the 1500s of the Tower of Babel. And I want you to notice that on the right is a picture of the European Parliament building in Strasburg, France. I want you to notice that the European Parliament building in Strasburg, France is built exactly according to the artist's rendition in the 1500s of the Tower of Babel. And so the leaders of the European Union are definitely making a statement that they are going to rebuild the Tower of Babel. And looking at the background and the history of Hanukkah from the Wikipedia Encyclopedia, it explains that around the year 200, Jews lived as an autonomous people in the land of Israel, which at that time was controlled by the Seleucid king of Syria. The Jewish people paid taxes to Syria and accepted its legal authority, and by and large were free to follow their own faith, maintain their own jobs, and engage in trade. However, by the year 180 BC, Antiochus IV Epiphanes ascended to the Seleucid throne. At first, little changed, but under his reign, Jews were gradually forced to violate the precepts of their faith. Jews rebelled at having to do this. Under the reign of Antiochus IV, the temple in Jerusalem was looted, Jews were massacred, and Judaism was effectively outlawed. And so we see a pattern that when the Jewish people are in a country, that oftentimes they are invited to be in those lands, and initially they prosper and things go well, but in the land, laws gradually change, and in the laws gradually changing, people don't react to them, but ultimately there comes a point in time when these laws are against the people of the God of Israel, and it creates a conflict. And this is what happened in the days of Antiochus Epiphanes IV. In 1 Maccabees, in chapter 1 and verse 10, in describing Antiochus coming to power, it describes how that he made a decree that everyone should follow Greek culture. 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 41. Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. The prophetic significance of this is this very same thing is going on in the days and the times in which we are living. That the global elite are trying to do away with national sovereignty, and that everyone would be following common laws. And this is trying to be expressed in Europe with the European Union, and individual nation states in Europe are asked to give up their own laws within their nations and accept European law, and to give up elements and aspect of their national sovereignty. This is in effect the reenactment of the decrees of Antiochus IV. And this will be fully manifested as we get to the tribulation period, where in Revelation chapter 13, the beast and the beast system rules for 42 months, wherein there is the setup of one world government in a decree that everyone follow international law according to the rules of one world government. In declaring the following of Greek culture, Antiochus decreed the outlawing of the following of the Torah. In 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 44, it explains that Antiochus sent letters by messengers to Jerusalem and the cities of Judah that they should follow the strange laws of the land, that is, Greek culture and Greek laws. And as a result, Antiochus in 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 45 forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that the people should not follow the Sabbath and the festival days. And then in 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 47, that they should eat swine's flesh or pig and other unclean beasts, for the end purpose that the Jewish people would no longer be following the Torah and all of the commandments of the Torah. Now, this decree that Antiochus gave, whoever would not follow this decree was subject to death. 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 44, Antiochus sent letters that everyone should follow the ways of the Greek culture. In 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 50, that whoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he should die. 1 Maccabees 1:51, that Antiochus wrote, and he appointed overseers over all the people, commanding the cities of Judah to sacrifice city by city. As a result of these actions by Antiochus Epiphanes IV, there was a group of Jewish priests known as the Maccabees who revolted against the decrees of Antiochus. From the Wikipedia encyclopedia, it explains, in the year 167, Antiochus ordered an altar to Zeus to be placed in the temple in Jerusalem. Mattathias, a Jewish priest, and his 5 sons led a rebellion against Antiochus. Judah, one of the sons of Mattathias, was known as Judah Maccabee, or Judah the Hammer. By the year 166 BC, Mattathias died, and Judah took his place as the leader of the revolt against Antiochus. In 1 Maccabees chapter 2, verses 19 through 22, we see that Mattathias instructed his sons to follow the Torah and to not obey the evil decrees of Antiochus. Then Mattathias answered and spake with a loud voice, though all nations that are under the king's dominion obey him, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers. God forbid that we should forsake the Torah and the ordinances. We will not hearken to the king's words to go from our religion, either on the right or the left. 1 Maccabees chapter 2, verse 49 and 50. Now when the time drew near that Mattathias should die, he said to his sons, now has pride and rebuke gotten strength, and the time of destruction and wrath of indignation. Now therefore, my sons, be you zealous for the Torah, and give your lives for the covenant of your fathers. The name Maccabee probably means hammer, and is properly applied only to the first leader of the revolt, Judas, the third son of the priest Mattathias. The name Maccabee might be derived from the battle cry of the revolt from Exodus in chapter 15 and verse 11. Mikamoka Ba'alim Yahweh, who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? In Hebrew, the first letters of this 4-word slogan form the acronym Mem, Kaf, Bet, Yod, which we can say from this Maccabee. Next, I'll show you the Hebrew from Exodus in chapter 15 and verse 11, wherein the first letter in each of the first 4 words of Exodus chapter 15 verse 11 will then make the word Maccabee. In 165 BC, the Jewish revolt against the Seleucid monarchy was successful. The temple was liberated and rededicated. The festival of Hanukkah was instituted by Judah Maccabee and his brothers to celebrate the rededication of the altar in the temple in Jerusalem. 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 59. After having recovered Jerusalem and the temple, Judah ordered the temple to be cleansed, a new altar to be built in place of the polluted one, and new holy vessels to be made. 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 36. When the fire had been kindled anew upon the altar, and the lamps of the candlestick lit, the dedication of the altar was celebrated for 8 days amid sacrifices and songs. We are told about the Maccabees rededicating the temple in 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verses 36 through 38. Then said Judas and his brethren, Behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up and cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary. Upon this all the hosts assembled themselves together and went up into Mount Zion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate, and the altar profaned, and the gates burned up, and shrubs growing in the courts, as in a forest or in one of the mountains, yea, in the priest's chambers pulled down. 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verses 42, 43, and 48, that he chose priests who were blameless, that had delight in the Torah, who cleansed the sanctuary, and hallowed the courts. 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 52. On the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Kislev, verse 53 of 1 Maccabees chapter 4, they offered sacrifice according to the Torah upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made. So notice on the day that there was a desecration in the temple was the day when they rededicated the temple. And this was the 25th day of the Jewish month of Kislev. And this became the day in which we begin to celebrate Hanukkah. Hanukkah is actually a celebration of victory against a revolt against a Greek culture who wanted to mandate their ways upon the people of the God of Israel and mandate that they do not follow the Torah, but instead adhere to the ways of the Greeks. And in the God of Israel helping his people to be victorious in this rebellion, Hanukkah is the celebration of this victory. In 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 56 and 59, we are told that the Maccabees celebrated the rededication for 8 days. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days. And they offered burnt offerings with gladness and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. Moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, beginning with the 25th day of the month of Kislev. From the Wikipedia encyclopedia, it's explained that Maccabees most likely linked the celebration of this event with SUKKOT, which is the Feast of Tabernacles. A number of historians believe that the reason for the 8-day celebration was that the first Hanukkah was, in effect, a belated celebration of the festival of SUKKOT, or the Feast of Tabernacles. 2 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 9, and 2 Maccabees chapter 10, verse 6. During the war with the Greeks, the Jews were not able to celebrate SUKKOT properly. SUKKOT also lasts for 8 days and is a holiday in which the lighting of lamps played a prominent role in the time of the Second Temple period, which we are told about in the Talmud in the tractate SUKKOT. Lights were also kindled in the household, and a popular name of the festival, according to the the Jewish historian Josephus of the 1st century, it was called the Festival of Lights. In 2 Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 9, it says, "And now see that you keep the Feast of Tabernacles in the month Kislev." Well, actually, the Feast of Tabernacles is the 7th month, which is the month of Tishrei. But because most likely the Jewish people were not able to keep the Feast of Tabernacles properly when there was a war with the Greeks, and the temple was desecrated, that to commemorate the joy of celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles, you have the celebration of Hanukkah for 8 days. And so in 2 Maccabees chapter 10 verse 5, it says, "Now upon the same day that the strangers profaned the temple, on the very same day it was cleansed again, even the 25th day of the month of Kislev." 2 Maccabees chapter 10 verse 6, "And they kept the 8 days with gladness, as in the feast of the tabernacles." And so we can see that they likened the celebration of Hanukkah to the celebration of the Feast of Tabernacles. 2 Maccabees chapter 10 verse 7, "They bear branches and boughs and palms," which is what the Torah prescribes is the way that you're supposed to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. Is found in Leviticus in chapter 23. And then in 2 Maccabees chapter 10 verse 8, "They ordained also by a common statute and decree that every year those days should be kept of the whole nation of the Jews." Hanukkah is also associated with the olive harvest in Israel. From the Wikipedia Encyclopedia, it explains, "It's been noted that Jewish festivals are connected to the harvesting of the biblical 7 fruits, which Israel was famous for. Passover is the celebration of the barley harvest, Shavuot, or Pentecost, of the wheat harvest, SUKKOT of the figs, dates, pomegranates, and grapes, and Hanukkah of the olives. The olive harvest is in November, and olive oil would be ready in time for Hanukkah, which is usually celebrated in December." In the Talmud, in Shabbat 21b, it explains that after the Greek occupiers had been driven from the temple, the Maccabees went in to take down the pagan statues and to restore the temple. They discovered that most of the ritual items had been profaned. They sought ritually purified olive oil to light a menorah to rededicate the temple. However, they found only enough oil for a single day. They lit this and went about purifying new oil. Miraculously, that tiny amount of oil burned for the 8 days it took to have new oil pressed and be made ready. It is for this reason that Jews celebrate Hanukkah by lighting a candle each night of the festival. Continuing from the Wikipedia Encyclopedia, the miracle of Hanukkah is referred to in the Talmud, but not in the book of the Maccabees. This holiday marks the defeat of the Seleucid forces who had tried to prevent Israel from practicing their faith. Judah Maccabee and his brothers destroyed overwhelmingly forces and rededicated the temple. The 8-day festival is marked by the kindling of lights with a special menorah known in modern Hebrew as a Hanukkah. Now, a regular menorah has 7 lamps, but a Hanukkah has 9 lamps. And the Hanukkah is specially for the celebration of Hanukkah. In the Talmud, 2 customs are presented regarding how you are to light the Hanukkah candles. It was usual to either display 8 lamps on the first night of the celebration of Hanukkah, and then to reduce the number on each successive night, or the alternative is to begin with 1 lamp the first night, increasing the number till you light 8 on the last night of Hanukkah. And in the first century, the followers of the school of Shammai favored the former customs, that is, lighting 8 lights and then decreasing them each day. But the followers of Hillel advocated lighting 1 lamp and then increasing each lamp till you get to the 8th day of Hanukkah. One of the customs of celebrating Hanukkah is to spin the dreidel. And the reason for this custom is that given that the Greeks forbid the following of the Torah, when religious Jews thought that perhaps there were Greek authorities around them where they would get in trouble if it was seen that they were studying the Torah, they would act like they were playing a game. And so the dreidel represents the game which they would act like they were playing. But then when they thought that the Greek authorities were not around them anymore, they would put away the games and then they would open up the Torah and study the Torah. So one of the best known symbols of Hanukkah is the dreidel. A dreidel is a 4-sided top with a Hebrew letter on each side. And the 4 letters are Shin, He, Gimel, and Nun. And these letters represent a great miracle happened there. However, in Israel, the dreidel is a little bit different. And the letters in an Israeli dreidel mean a great miracle happened here. The dreidel game was popular during the rule of Antiochus before the Maccabees revolt, a time when soldiers executed any Jews who were caught practicing their faith. When religious Jews gathered to study the Torah, they had the top ready in case they heard soldiers approaching. If the soldiers appeared, they would hide the Holy Scriptures and pretend to play with the dreidel. Next, we are going to go over for you what is regarded in the book of Maccabees as the evil decrees of Antiochus IV. And what is amazing when we look in detail of these evil decrees of Antiochus is that these evil decrees of Antiochus are the way in which traditional Christianity says that this is the way that they are to express their faith in Yeshua as the Messiah, as they believe is explained primarily by Paul in the New Testament. So looking at these evil decrees, they consisted of the following. Number 1, that the people should not follow the Torah. Number 2, that they should not circumcise their children. Number 3, they should not celebrate the Sabbath. Number 4, they should not keep the biblical festivals. Number 5, that sacrifices should not be made in the temple. And number 6, that people should be free to eat whatever they want and to eat pig. And so we're going to see now how this is recorded in the book of Maccabees as being evil decrees of Antiochus. In 1 Maccabees, in chapter 1, verse 41, it explains that Antiochus wrote to the whole kingdom that they should all be one people or follow Greek culture. And in verse 42, that everyone should leave his laws, or anything that conflicts with Greek law and Greek culture should no longer be practiced. Verse 49, to the end that they might forget the Torah and change all the ordinances. And regarding the decree that Antiochus declared in 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 44, in verse 48, it explains that he decreed that the Jewish people should not circumcise their children. 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 45, that they should not celebrate the biblical Sabbath and the biblical festivals. In 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 45, that they shouldn't offer burnt offerings and drink offerings in the temple. Also in 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verse 45, that they should eat pig and other unclean beasts. So isn't it amazing that what is recorded in 1 Maccabees as a decree of Antiochus that the people in the Greek Empire should all follow Greek ways, that in following Greek ways you are not to follow the Torah, you are not to circumcise your children, that you're not to keep the biblical Sabbath, you're not to keep the biblical festivals, and there shouldn't be sacrifices that are made in the temple, and that you should eat unclean things, and that you should eat pig, is that these are the items that traditional Christianity say that this is the way that you express your faith in Yeshua as the Messiah, as they believe is taught in the New Testament primarily by Paul. How is it then that that thing that Antiochus tried to get the people to do by decree, which resulted in the Jewish people who endeavored to follow the Torah, that they rebelled against, how is it that Antiochus was unsuccessful to do by decree, somehow crept in as an accepted religious practice and is seen as the way that you are supposed to express your faith if you believe in Yeshua being the Messiah and being the King of Israel? The evil decrees of Antiochus is, in truth, the spirit of Antichrist. And the spirit of Antichrist is the spirit of anti-Torah. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and verses 3 and 4 it is written, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition." And why is the man of sin called the son of perdition? He's called the one who's anti-Torah, which clearly Antiochus Epiphanes IV was anti-Torah. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 4, "Who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." In 1 John chapter 4 and verse 3, "And every spirit that confesses not that Yeshua Messiah is come in the flesh is not of God, and this is the spirit of Antichrist, whereof you have heard that it should come, and even now already is in the world." And so, when Yeshua was asked in Matthew in chapter 24 by his disciples in verse 3, "Tell us, what shall be the sign of your coming and of the end of the ages?" He goes on to explain in Matthew chapter 24 verse 12. Yeshua said this is one of the signs of his coming. It says, "Because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold." And the word iniquity in the King James is the Greek word anomia, which means those who don't follow the Torah. The word anomia is found in 1 John in chapter 3 and verse 4, where there it is written that whosoever commits sin transgresses the Torah. For sin is anomia. Sin is transgressing the Torah. Well, the translators translated anomia as transgressing the Torah in 1 John chapter 3 and verse 4. And if we translate the word anomia the same way in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 12, Yeshua said that one of the signs of his coming, Matthew 24 verse 3, is that because transgressing the Torah shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. And so one of the signs of his coming is that people would be rampant in transgressing or not following the Torah. How is it then that those who say they believe in Yeshua as the Messiah believe that the way in which they are to express their faith in him is not to follow the Torah? I believe we need to rethink how we understand the Scriptures, especially Yeshua when he said in John chapter 14 verse 15, "If you love me, keep my commandments." So far what we've covered in this teaching is we've given you the historical background that ultimately led to the celebration of what today we call Hanukkah. And we shared with you some customs that are associated with Hanukkah. And we shared with you how the evil decrees of Antiochus that caused a rebellion in his day, where he decreed them because it was the way in which you were to follow Greek laws and Greek culture, that his decrees are how traditional Christians today view that they're supposed to express their faith in Yeshua as the Messiah. In the last part of this teaching, we're going to show you how the events that historically happened with Antiochus Epiphanes IV, that's prophesied in the book of Daniel, which led to the celebration of Hanukkah, that they are prophetic of the events that will also happen in the end of days during the tribulation period. In order to understand how this is so, we need to understand the biblical principle that biblical history is prophecy. In Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 9 it is written, "The thing that has been," that's the past, "is that which shall be," that's the future. "And that which is done," that which is being done right now, "is that which shall be done in the future. And there's nothing new under the sun." Ecclesiastes chapter 3 verse 15. That which has been historically is what's happening now. And that which is to be, the future, has already been. And God requires that which is past. Therefore, in the application of this principle, the things that happened historically, which we are told about in the book of Daniel as it related to Greek rule in the land of Israel, and specifically what happened in the rule and reign of Antiochus Epiphanes IV, that is prophetic of the tribulation in the end of days and what the beast and the beast system will do. There's a prophecy in Zechariah chapter 9 verse 13 regarding the end of days, that the sons of Zion will oppose the sons of Greece. That's what happened historically. That the Jewish priest, Mattathias and his sons, who wanted to stand for the Torah and the covenant that the God of Israel made with his people, they rebelled or opposed the sons of Greece. Zechariah chapter 9 verse 13, "When I have bent Judah for me and filled the bow with Ephraim, and I raised up your sons, O Zion, against your sons, O Greece. The Jews who decided to follow Greek culture and Greek ways were known as Hellenistic Jews, and the following of Greek culture was known as Hellenism. Hellenism is the word used to express the assimilation, especially by the Jews, of Greek speech, manners, and culture from the 4th century BC through the 1st centuries of the present era. The victorious campaign of Alexander the Great had linked the East to the West. The victory was not simply a political one. Its spiritual influence was much greater. The Greek language became a common language for Near Asia, and with the language went Greek culture, Greek art, and Greek thought. The Hellenistic influence pervaded everything, and even in the very strongholds of Judaism. It modified the organization of the state, the laws, and public affairs, art, science, and industry, affecting even the ordinary things of life and the common associations of the people. By the introduction of Grecian art, a door was opened to debauchery and riotous living, and though Judaism was hardly menaced by the introduction of direct idolatry, the connection of this culture with some limited Greek polytheism became a real danger to the Jewish religion. For this reason, those Jews who followed after Greek culture and Greek ways, and they followed after the evil decrees of Antiochus in the book of Maccabees, these Jews are called wicked or ungodly men. 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 11, 1 Maccabees chapter 7 and verse 5. In 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 10, after explaining Antiochus Epiphanes coming to power, in verse 11 it says, "In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, Let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow." So this device pleased them well. 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 13. "Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen, wherein they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen. And they made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief." Antiochus, in effect, decreed a new world order under Greek culture. 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 41. Antiochus wrote letters and decreed that everyone should be of one people or follow Greek ways. 1 Maccabees chapter 1 verse 42. "And everyone should leave his laws, his culture." And all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. 1 Maccabees 1:43. "Yes, many of the Israelites consented to his religion, and sacrificed unto idols, and profaned the Sabbath." Democracy comes from Greece. And from the Jewish Encyclopedia, it explains that the term democracy was given in ancient Athens in the 5th century BC. That state is generally seen as the earliest example of a system corresponding to some of the modern notions of democratic rule. The nation of Israel today is struggling with how they can maintain and keep their identity as Jewish people, as a people who follow the Torah, yet they have to live in a world wherein Israel itself is dominated and influenced by Western culture and Western ways. And so we have influenced in Israel the ways of Hollywood. Israel, its government is a democratic form of government. And many of the Jews in the land of Israel, rather than following the Torah, they seek to live their lives according to these Western values. And they're also struggling with being like the nations of the world and to not offend the other nations of the world, especially the United States of America, as well as the European Union. In Daniel chapter 8, verse 25, it explains that through peace, Antiochus shall destroy many. And this is a prophecy of the end of days. We are told about the fulfillment of this prophecy in the book of Daniel regarding Antiochus in 1 Maccabees in chapter 1. In verse 29, we're told that Antiochus IV came to Jerusalem. And then in verse 30, that he spoke peaceable words, but they were all deceit. And as a result, many in Israel were killed. The Oslo Accords of 1993 was an effort by Israel to make peace with the Palestinian Authority, and in doing so, to gain the approval of the international community, especially the United States of America. Next, we're going to see how Hanukkah is associated with the controversy of Zion. What then is the controversy of Zion? The controversy of Zion is over the people of the God of Israel and the land of Israel itself. And looking at biblical definition of who or what Zion is, it not only pertains to the people of the God of Israel and the land of Israel, but we're told the Torah will go forth from Zion. Zion is the fulfillment of the covenant made with Abraham. Zion is a term for the end of the exile of Jacob. Zion is a term for the Messianic era. And the fullness of biblical Zion is Yeshua redeeming and dwelling with his people. In Isaiah chapter 51, verse 16, we see that Zion is a term for the people of the God of Israel. Say unto Zion, you are my people. Zion is a term for the land of Israel itself. Joel chapter 2, verse 1, blow the shofar in Zion, sound an alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble. We're told in Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 3 that the Torah will go forth from Zion. The end of the verse, out of Zion shall go forth the Torah and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Zion is a term associated with the end of the exile of the house of Jacob. Psalm 147 verse 2, the Lord builds up Jerusalem. Jerusalem and Zion are synonymous terms. What is the building up of Jerusalem or Zion? He gathers together the outcasts of Israel. Yeshua will return when he builds up Zion. Psalm 102 verse 13, you will arise and have mercy upon Zion, for the time to favor her, yea, the set time is come. When the Lord builds up Zion, the building up of Zion is the building up of Jerusalem. That is when he shall appear in his glory. Yeshua dwells in Zion. Isaiah chapter 8 verse 18. The Lord of hosts dwells in Mount Zion. And then in Joel chapter 3 verse 16 it says the Lord will roar out of Zion. Zion is believing that Yeshua is the Messiah. 1 Peter chapter 2 verses 5 and 6. You are lively stones. You're built up a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Yeshua HaMashiach. Wherefore also it is contained in the scripture, behold, I lay in Zion a chief cornerstone, elect, precious, and he that believes on him, the stone that is in Zion, he that believes on him shall not be confounded. So, what is Zion? What is biblical Zion? It's the unity or the oneness of the Messiah, even Yeshua HaMashiach, ruling over his people, in them proclaiming and understanding that he is the Messiah, where they appoint him as their head, Hosea chapter 1 and verse 11. And he gathers and redeems his people back to the land of Israel, and they're following his Torah. Ultimately, biblical Zion will be fulfilled once Yeshua sets his feet down on the Mount of Olives and sets up his kingdom. Given that we understand now what is biblical Zion, there's a prophecy in Zechariah chapter 9 verse 13 that the sons of Zion, those who believe that Yeshua is the Messiah, who are seeking to follow his Torah, that believe in the covenant that was made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and believe that the Messiah will gather and unite the 12 tribes of Israel during the tribulation and bring his people back to the land, they will be opposed by the sons of Greece. And who are the sons of Greece? Those who are seeking to establish a new world order, one world government. And the sons of Greece are able to set up their new world order, their one world government, for 42 months, as we're told in Revelation in chapter 13. However, from the decrees of the sons of Greece that everyone should follow the new world order and the international laws that establish one world government, those who stand for the Bible and biblical values, they will rebel against the sons of Greece. And we have the fulfillment of the prophecy in Zechariah chapter 9 verse 13 that the sons of Zion will oppose the sons of Greece. And there will be a rebellion against the wishes of the nations of the world to establish a Palestinian state based upon 67 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital in the land of Israel. And those in the land who will not accept this decree and this desire of the nations for a Palestinian state based upon 67 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital, in rebelling, they will not acknowledge the Palestinian state, but instead will declare an independent state in Judea, Samaria, or the West Bank with Jerusalem as its capital. And this is what the Bible calls biblical Zion, which will be born during the tribulation period, Isaiah chapter 66 and verse 8. And Messiah will fight for biblical Zion, opposing the sons of Greece. So the ultimate outcome of the sons of Zion opposing the sons of Greece, because the Messiah will fight for Zion, is there will be the redemption of the sons of Zion. There will be a gathering, uniting of the 12 tribes of Israel. Messiah will wage war and defeat the sons of Greece. Yeshua will return, set his feet down on the Mount of Olives, and he will set up his kingdom in the earth, wherein he will be teaching the Torah to all nations from Jerusalem. Isaiah chapter 2 and verse 3. So the ultimate outcome of the war between the sons of Zion and the sons of Greece is the establishment of the biblical state of Zion that will be headed by the Messiah. And the biblical state of Zion is Yeshua being recognized as the Messiah of Israel, the King of Israel, and we will have the fulfillment of the covenant that was made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Yeshua will be ruling and reigning over his people, the house of Jacob, and they will be following and keeping his Torah. He sets up his kingdom, and his kingdom will be governed by a Torah-based government. So this is the prophetic fulfillment of Hanukkah, that the rebellion of the Maccabees against the Greek decrees of Antiochus IV is a prophecy of a conflict of the end of days between the sons of Zion and the sons of Greece. And even as the Maccabees, against all odds in leading the rebellion, defeated the Greeks and they were able to rededicate the temple, the Messiah will be fighting for the sons of Zion, and he will deliver them from the sons of Greece, and he will judge the sons of Greece, as we're told in the book of Daniel, that a stone rose up out of the mountain, and it crushed the 10 toes, and the stone became a great mountain. This is a reference to Messiah judging the nations, the sons of Greece, who set up one world government and decreed that everyone follow this system, as we're told in Revelation in chapter 13. But Messiah redeems and delivers his people from this system, and the celebration of this event is Messiah ruling and reigning in his kingdom. And so this is why we have the scripture in Jeremiah chapter 31 verse 6 that the watchman upon Mount Ephraim will cry, "Arise and let us go up to Zion." This is also why we have the words of the Psalms, Psalm 121 verse 4, "He that keeps Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. And pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They will prosper that love thee." Now, remember always these words from 1 John chapter 2 and verse 6. He who says he abides in him, he who says he's a believer in Yeshua as the Messiah, ought himself to walk. That means to live our lives even as he walked. How did Yeshua walk or live his life? He followed the Torah of his Father. Even so, Yeshua instructed those who believe on him in John chapter 14 verse 15. "If you love me, keep my commandments." Shalom in Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.
Oh, I love your word. All the days my meditation. Oh, how I love your Torah. All the days my conversation.